nasty.
So I am a huge proponent of the prenup. If you're questioning whether you can bring that up to your fiance, you ought to question whether or not this is the right relationship. Ultimately, those tough conversations are going to have to happen at some point, and if they don't, you might be doomed from day one. That's called a severability clause, and it allows the court to kind of cross out lines or paragraphs that the court finds offensive, if you will, while maintaining the rest of the agreement.
Nicole is a family law specialist. She is somebody that knows more in her pinky nail than most attorneys know in their entire body when it comes to family law. She has done everything from litigation to pre-lit. She's worked with judges, but she just has so much experience, and she's one of the best litigators that I know. Nicole is going to really break down today the details of what it means to be a family law attorney, and not just a family law attorney, but somebody who's dealing with tens or hundreds of millions of dollars in assets. And she's going to explain to you the benefits of having a prenup, what the divorce process looks like, and what the different paths are, and how you can protect yourself throughout this entire process. If you have any interest in family law, if you're potentially thinking about getting a divorce, or you just want to plan properly for your marriage, this is the podcast for you, so chime on in. We're going to give you a lot of great information today. All right, let's roll. All right, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Nasty Truth Podcast. Today we have my lovely friend Nicole Nuzzo here. Nicole, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about Nicole. So Nicole is a certified family law specialist. What that means is that she specializes in family law and divorces, okay? And Nicole has probably more experience in her pinky nail than most attorneys have in their entire body, okay? Nicole was ranked top 10 attorneys and litigators for family law the last 3 years in a row. She is part of the Orange County Bar Association, but she's also on the board for the family law section. She's also on the committee for professionalism and ethics. Nicole is also one of the youngest partners at Bremer, White, Brown, and O'Mara. It's a tongue twister. There's about 18 names in that firm over there. Nicole is probably one of the hardest working attorneys that I know, but specifically she litigates more than most of the attorneys that I know. She's also a graduate of the National Trial, what is that?
National Institute of Trial Advocacy.
Okay, and she's graduated from there, and she has experience that most people dream of. I'm super stoked to have you here, Nicole. I'm excited for you to break down what it means to be a family law attorney, explain people what they're going to go through in a divorce, and I'm excited to kind of get started today.
I have a wealth of information to share.
Cool. Awesome. So, first of all, I like to joke when I talk about family law attorneys. I always say you guys deserve a special place in heaven because you guys deal with shit that most people don't deal with on a regular basis. When it comes to family law, basically, they're dealing with the client, they're dealing with their family, they're dealing with their parents, they're dealing with their dogs, they're dealing with their furniture, every aspect of their lives. And it's not normal, in most types of law. In most types of law, you're dealing with the problem. But when it comes to divorce law, you're dealing with everything.
We are dealing with it all. So kids, money, emotions, just like you said, families. We're, a family that was created as one enterprise is now being split. That means kids have to be in two different places, money needs to shift around, and people still need to live and move on from it, but in a way that is holistic and best not only for the finances, but for the whole family and the kids too.
Absolutely. So you're looking at everything in the picture and trying to do what's best for everybody. So I want to start off today. I want to talk about what it means to be a certified family law specialist. So what does it mean to be a specialist in your field? Because I think a lot of people, they advertise that they're specialists, right, or that they're the best at what they do. But I believe that to be a specialist, you have to take like a second bar exam, or can you break that down for us?
Sure, yeah. So a lot of people say they're specialists, but there's actually specific designations that the state Board of Legal Specialization has, one of which is for family law. And to get that designation, you first have to take an examination, which is similar to a bar exam. I actually think it was harder than the bar exam. Then you also have to submit peer review, so peers have to write in and attest to your credentials, your qualifications. And then lastly,
I didn't know that.
You have to submit and show that you've done a certain number of hearings, a certain number of negotiated settlements, etc. And once all of that is done, they review your entire application and determine whether or not you satisfactorily have met the requirements to become a specialist.
Okay.
And then once that's completed, you get to renew it. Every, I believe, 5 years we have to renew.
Okay.
And that includes continuing legal education, of course.
Got it. So that's really easy is what you're saying.
You know what? It was a walk in the park.
That's funny. How many people do you think apply for this? Like, because I know the bar pass rate is something like 40%, right? Like, how many people apply and how many people actually get approved to be a specialist?
Man, I don't know. I tried when I first took the exam, and I took it once, and I was one and done, thank God.
Awesome.
But when I took it, I didn't look too much into statistics. It was just about
getting it done,
what needed to be done, and getting it done.
Yeah.
And that was it for me. It wasn't trying to figure out whether I'd be at the top or not, or what the chances or odds were. There was only one plan, and it was to pass on the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Is it similar to the bar where it's like multiple choice and then essays, or is it just all essays? Like, what is kind of the format?
It may be similar to the bar now. When I took the bar, it was different than what it is now.
Yeah,
but
3 days versus 2 now.
Right.
Yeah, they made it easier. What the heck?
I didn't want to say that, but I think they have made it a little bit easier. But with respect to the specialist exam, it was 1 day.
Yeah.
Part of the day is multiple choice, and part of the day is essays. The difference being that the essays, I believe we took 8 essays in 4 hours or something of that sort. So it was, you really needed to know that information and be able to synthesize it fast. As opposed to the bar, you had a little bit more time.
Got it. So they really condensed it all. So it wasn't a 2-day exam, it was a 1-day exam?
It was a 1-day exam.
Got it. Yeah, that's emotionally a lot. I remember after taking the bar exam, I remember one of my mentors telling me that afterwards, you're never going to be more tired than after you take the bar exam. And I just remember like walking out of that test and just feeling like a weight was just dropped on my body, and my brain just immediately said, we're done, go to bed, this is it. And I slept for like 18 hours the next day, and I was just like a dead person. And it was a combination of like physical exhaustion, mental exhaustion, emotional exhaustion, just like your body was just like, nope, we have nothing left to give, go ahead and take a load off.
That's really what the exams to me, I think, test not only your intelligence and your ability to recite the law, but really your ability to crank it out in the time frame that they're asking you to do it.
Yeah.
And not stress out about it. Just do it calmly, and they're really testing whether you can calmly perform as a lawyer.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. I mean, every day our job it's a high stress environment. Of course, there's some that are not as stressful, right? Being a litigator is, I'm getting more and more into litigation. I'm realizing with litigation, there's just so many more deadlines and there's so many more repercussions. If you mess up the littlest thing, you can lose a case on a technicality. And so the bar exam is a very small piece of the kind of stress that you deal with every single day. And I talk to a lot of my friends that are potentially like law students, and they're like, well, why is it so hard? I'm like, because it needs to be representative of what the real thing is. They can't just let anyone become an attorney. And so a lot of respect for that. And then, of course, a lot more respect for someone like you who's like, I want to be designated as a specialist. Now, when you get designated as a specialist, does it just mean that your job recognizes you, or what were the benefits that you have seen from becoming a certified family law specialist?
Truly, the biggest benefit to me was, you come out of law school and they teach you how to analyze the law. They don't teach you how to practice law by any means of the word. So you have on-the-job training. Yeah. And with that, you don't just start every case at the beginning, of the divorce case. And so you've got all these little pocket areas of knowledge. Maybe you did a support case or you did a property case. And the specialist exam really took all of that and put it together for you.
Okay.
So one of the biggest benefits I personally experienced from becoming a specialist was seeing how everything interplayed with each other and really gaining all of that knowledge and learning that, and then learning bankruptcy law, how that applies in family law, and how tax applies. So all of those things were kind of synthesized for me through that process, and that was probably the biggest benefit to me and my clients. Of course, people look at you differently or think of you differently because you're a specialist, but to me, the most important part was putting all of the puzzle pieces together and seeing how they fit.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, you kind of like touched on something, and we'll get into it deeper, but, as Nicole mentioned, like bankruptcy law, real estate law, there's so many different fields that go into family law. And I've done a couple of divorces for friends, and I said, I never want to do that again. So once again, God bless you for going through with doing that every single day. But it's a very difficult field, and you really have to have a wide breadth of knowledge to deal with these different types of matters. And we're also going to get into later, but Nicole only deals with usually high net worth individuals, and we're dealing with millions of dollars here, sometimes tens of millions with these individuals. And when you're dealing with that much money, there's just so many different aspects that are involved. It's not just a simple divorce where it's just like, okay, we can maybe have a mediator come do this. You really have to know different types of law to be able to help you get through to the end line, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we see a lot of high net worth cases, $10 million, $100 million cases plus. And when you get there, it's really business law involved, tax law for sure, bankruptcy at times, real estate like you mentioned, and with a family law glazed over it all.
Yeah.
So, we often have to bring in specialists in various different fields in our cases to really pull it together. But the important part, and the reason you want a specialist handling your family law case, is because we can identify those issues. We recognize them, and we also know what we don't know. So we can identify the issue and then, bring somebody in who is a specialist in that specific area of law.
Yeah, and I think one of the greatest skills of anyone is just knowing what they don't know and not pretending that they know something, right? I always joke around when people ask me, like, I don't know, I know nothing, right? Like if I don't know anything about a subject, or if I'm not a specialist in it, it's just always better to point people in the direction of the person that does know, because in the long run, you might be hurting them more than helping them. And especially when it comes to law, because there's just so many nuances in each specific field. And a lot of people call me, and I have a Rolodex of 75 attorneys that's categorized, not just like most people will have just like PI, right? But I have like PI, medical malpractice, workers' comp, only construction cases, right? Or even when it comes to like civil litigation and business attorneys, I'm like, this person is a specialist at M&As, mergers and acquisitions. This person is a specialist just at transactional. And it's just like within the law, you have to find somebody that does exactly what you want. And, not to pick on the attorneys, but there's tens of thousands of us. You can find the specialist out there. You just need to take the time and find the guy that is your guy or the gal that's your gal, and really work with the specialist that's dealing with your situation.
So true. And even within a specialty, you can have people who just have institutional knowledge of certain topics. For example, in family law, some of my partners handle cases that I don't handle. For example, parental termination, termination of parental rights.
Okay.
I don't really handle much of that work, but I have a partner who is awesome in that area, is knowledgeable in that area, and any questions I have on that topic, I'm happy to say, I don't know, but I know somebody who will. Yeah. And that is just so important that your lawyer is willing to say, I don't know.
Absolutely. Let's talk about your firm a bit now that we're kind of on that topic. So you work for Bremer, White, Brown, and O'Mara, correct? Am I missing a name?
You're right, okay. And you got it all right, it's pronounced right.
Yeah, cool. So this is one of the biggest law firms in Orange County, correct? And I know that you guys do a lot of work, not just in family law. You guys actually have several branches, and because I even go against your firm on the defense side for personal injury matters. I actually have 3 cases against you guys now, and it's funny, I always talk to them like, do you know Nicole? And they're like, oh, we all love Nicole. So all nice things that they have to say about you. But you guys have a huge firm. I would love to hear a little bit about it, and then I want to kind of hear about your rise to becoming a partner, because I think, are you not the youngest partner that's ever been a partner?
I don't know if we're allowed to technically ask age, so I don't know, but I would gather to say if I'm not the youngest, I'm close to it.
Yeah.
I think so.
She's like 25 years old, guys.
I wish I was 25. Bremer White is a full-service civil litigation firm.
Yeah.
So what that means is we don't only handle family law cases, we handle business litigation, like you had mentioned, a lot of general liability and insurance defense work. We do some plaintiffs' work. It really runs the gamut. If it falls under kind of the umbrella of civil litigation, we probably do it.
Yeah.
And with that, I think it brings a great help to me as a family law attorney, having worked at boutique family law firms and moving to this firm about midway through my career. The resources available are
almost
just
unlimited.
unlimited. And when we talk about family law and all the different aspects of it, really the benefit is I can go to the estate planning guy down the hall and get his advice on that particular topic that might come up, or the real estate partner for help in that area. So really, truly a wealth of resources at Bremer White.
No, 100%. That's probably the biggest thing that I struggle with at my firm sometimes, right? We're like, we're a smaller size shop, and that's the one thing that we struggle with. It's like sometimes you just need to go ask somebody a question that has like 30 years experience or 40 years experience, or whatever it may be, right? And so you really are able to access everyone from the person that's been doing it a couple years to someone who's been doing it for a long time, and in every different almost field within civil litigation.
That's right. And truly, it's not only the litigated cases, but also the different areas of law. It's very atypical to have a family law department amongst a civil litigation firm. And I find that my clients benefit from it astronomically.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
And myself, it's a lot less stress. Again, going back to, you've got to go get that person that has that specialized knowledge. If they're down the hall, it's a lot easier than having to retain them and bring them into the case.
Got it. And then working at a big firm, right? It's a big firm when there's 5 names on the door, right? It's funny. I was talking to the videographer before you walked in, Ray. We were talking about what's the longest, amount of names you've ever seen at a firm, like 5, 6, 7, maybe max. But when you see that many, you know that they're a huge firm, because it doesn't just happen overnight. You have so much experience, and you're so gung-ho for your clients and very zealous. Why do you think that you just have so much more passion than many of the attorneys out there? What separates you?
I think for me, I became a lawyer because I wanted to help people, not because I wanted to make money, not for any other purpose, but to truly help people through one of the most difficult times they'll experience in their life. Mm-hmm. And to me, I've not done my job until I've helped you understand what went wrong in your marriage. Whatever it was, and how you can move past this now in a holistic way. Onward and upward is really my motto. I see you at your lowest low as far as a client goes, and I want to help rise up from that, help you rise up from that. So to me, I think that's my passion. My passion is really to help people through the difficult time and educate them along the way.
Why'd you choose family law?
Again, I think I just gravitated to, this was a practice area where I could make a difference on every individual client I touched. Yeah. I actually, the first job offer I received was actually a medical malpractice defense.
Oh, wow.
And I got that job offer, and I thought to myself, there's just no way I think I can do this. No. And so I think when you know that it's your passion, and this truly was my passion. Yeah,
no, I can agree with you. I tried 4 different types of law before this, and then I was like, no, this is the one. And it's funny because you kind of like fall into it. I thought I would be like this criminal defense attorney, in the courtroom every single day, defending, people's rights. But as you realize, you're not in a courtroom as often as you think. When you see all those TV shows growing up, you're like, oh, I'm going to be in the courtroom every single day. And no, it actually happens far and in between. But it's an interesting like journey to find out what type of law you're going to end up with. And when people always call me for advice, I tell them, look, when you're in law school, you don't care about the money, you just want the experience. So go work and be someone's slave for a couple months and just do every type of law you can get your hands on. Immigration, criminal defense, go do PI, go do family law, and really get your feet wet. And at some point, you're going to be like, I like this. This is something that actually resonates with me as a human being. And, sometimes it's like you were bullied when you were younger, or, your parents were immigrants and they were always treated like crap, or your parents went through a horrible divorce and you don't want to ever see that happen. And sometimes it's something that resonates with you personally. For me, I've been in 5 car accidents. So I know the process. I've been through the mess. I've dealt with some bad attorneys. I've dealt with some good attorneys. I've been through the treatment, and I enjoy helping people actually get better. And that's what resonated with me in the long run. But watching people figure out what their specialty is always a fun question to ask. Yeah,
for me, I did the same thing you did. I said, I'm going to try everything in law school. And I did. I mean, from education law to family law to civil litigation. Yeah. And for me, family law was just what felt right in my heart. Yeah. You really have to think about, what can I do every single day for the rest of my life and feel fulfilled in that And for me, that was family law.
Yeah, and the more I'm talking to you about it, I didn't realize the wide breadth of different stuff that family law touches, and it's very interesting. I mean, I do general counsel stuff myself, just to help like small business owners, because I just love business, and so that's probably like 10% of my practice. I just help like my friends and family with their stuff, but that's exciting stuff, right? It's never the same. It's always different, and I can imagine obviously every divorce is completely different depending on what their assets are and what they do for a living or who they're married to, right?
The personalities, I always tell people, I need to know why you're getting divorced, and it might not actually matter legally.
Yeah.
But it's going to help me figure out how to navigate your divorce. I also need to know what your personality is and what your spouse's personality is, because that's going to dictate how your divorce goes. And lastly, I need to know what attorney's representing your spouse, because that is going to dictate how things go.
100%. I mean, in most cases, depending on who the attorney is representing the other side, you can tell how most cases are going to go. For those of you who are not familiar with the industry, it seems there's always extremes. There's always the person who's way too aggressive for no reason, and there's the person who's very reasonable. And typically the person that's very reasonable, they're in my experience, much more masters of their craft, because they don't need to yell, scream, create a hullabaloo to pretend that they know what they're doing or to prove their points. They just crush you in the courtroom and they win all their motions, and they don't ever have to raise their voice because they just know they're going to win the case. I don't know if that's the same in family law, but I'm guessing it's along the same lines.
It's completely along the same lines. So you kind of have the people that you know are going to be reasonable. They know the law.
Yeah.
They're willing to determine what the facts are, which is sometimes an interesting process in divorce litigation. And they can step in the other's shoes and understand the arguments, even if you don't agree with them. You can appreciate that the other lawyer is making those arguments and have an intellectual debate about where this might fall at trial. And, those to me are the lawyers that are doing the right thing. And then there are those lawyers who are just going to excessively file motions with the court and do things that are not supported by the law, and that's not helpful to anyone.
No, not at all. So you love this so much that you are actually an adjunct professor at what school?
I was an adjunct professor at St. Francis.
Okay.
And it was an experience that truly was something, I was an education major, and so it was something I had always wanted to do, and I maybe will do it again in my life. I will tell you, it was so much work.
Yeah.
It was so much work, even though you know the law, because you are teaching it. And that means you need to know how to break it down at a level that somebody who doesn't know very much going through law school is going to really be able to pick it up, learn it, and then learn it for the bar exam, which to me was the most important part of my job, was getting these people the students to understand the law, understand the theory, but then also understand just what they needed to know for the bar exam, which, as you know, is something completely different. Yeah,
that's a beast all in itself. I mean, look, they take you to law school, they teach you what they can, but passing the bar exam is really its own beast. I mean, the way it worked for me is I just calculated it. So I'm like, this is a points game. I need to get this many points to pass, and people on these big exams, I think they get overwhelmed and they get super stressed out, and they start studying stuff that's never going to be on the test, like an obscure Fifth Amendment constitutional law thing that got tested once in the last 15 years. They're like, I gotta know this. And it's like a week before the test, and I'm like, you don't need to know that. You need to know the big important stuff. You need to focus on the big important stuff, and just like anything in life, if you focus on the big topics, you can learn the nuances later on, but just focus on what's gonna get you through it. And it's funny, I've helped 5 friends that have taken the bar exam 6 times, finally pass it, because I sat down and broke it down. I'm like, you need this many points. Stop focusing on all this stuff. Just focus on the stuff that you know is going to be on there. And it's really helped change their mindset. And that test is, it's its own beast. I can't imagine teaching people to have to pass it, though. That must have been a very difficult task.
It was. And actually, I taught a night class. So it was kind of interesting. Night classes usually have non-traditional students, the students that might be working during the day. So I had a lot of students who saw different areas of family law within their existing job and profession. And so they had a lot of off-the-wall questions at times that were a minute area in the law. But they also were just wanting to pass that bar exam so bad, like you said, and learning the game. And so for me, it was important to at least have them leave that course understanding how to win the game of the community property essay if they got that essay, because that was really what it was about for me. I feel like at times in law school, I wondered why somebody wasn't teaching me what I needed to know for the bar exam. Yeah. So my goal in teaching was to make sure you left my course with materials that you could take and study for the bar exam. Yeah, I think you'd hope that that was the point of what the teacher was teaching you, but of course, sometimes they're going to go off on tangents here and there. But yeah, I mean, the whole point of going to law school is so that you can pass that test, because it's like, what did you go to law school if you can't figure it out? But some people just can't figure it out, and it's I don't think it's so much that they don't know. They already know the information. They just stress themselves out that they overthink it, right? And so once again, it goes back to figure out what matters the most, focus on that, and you're going to do fine at the end of the day. All right, so I kind of want to segue, and I want to get into family law a bit, and I want to talk about, let's kind of take it from like a little bit of a timeline, right? So let's start before you get married, okay? So you're thinking about getting married, you have your lovely significant other, everything's going well, and you're like, I don't know if I want a prenup, maybe I want a prenup. Let's talk about what a prenup is and why they should get a prenup. Let's talk about the benefits, the negatives, and what your thoughts on it are, okay? So I am a huge proponent of the prenup. Just lay it out there. I think everyone should probably consider having a premarital agreement these days. And really, if you're questioning whether you can bring that up to your fiance, you ought to question whether or not this is the right relationship to kind of move forward with, because ultimately those tough conversations are going to have to happen at some point, and if they don't, you might be doomed from day one. So to me, a premarital agreement is an opportunity for two people who are coming together to create, in essence, a business of sorts, to do that in a way where there's open communication and there's clear expectations and it's all documented. You come into it without any fear of the unknown. And people that don't have premarital agreements don't have that same opportunity. So to me, a premarital agreement is a key, and even if you're not going to go forward with a premarital agreement, you should sit down with a family law lawyer before you get married and at least educate yourself on what your rights are in the marriage and also what your duties and responsibilities are. No, I agree with you entirely. Going into a marriage, it is like a business relationship. You're going to be combining everything from your assets to your bank accounts. You're going to be taking care of children now. There's just a lot of repercussions. It's almost like a contractual relationship that you're entering into. And we'll get more into what it means when you get married. But let's stay focused on the prenup for a little bit. So what are the biggest mistakes that you see when people are getting into a prenup? Like, what do they do wrong, or what, let's say, after signing the contract and a mistake that might be made, because I know there's some rules like they need to be given 7 days to review it, or an attorney needs to represent the other side of it. So what are some things that you see commonly happen? So not at my firm, but I'll tell you, I see things on the back end. So things that have happened and then they come to me and I have to creatively figure out how to handle it. And to me, a premarital agreement, both parties should be represented by independent counsel. It's not a requirement, but without it, it will be very challenging to enforce that premarital agreement. So that's the first thing. Secondly, mistake in premarital agreement, don't try to do things where if somebody commits adultery, then they get something or don't get something. It's against public policy, and people put it in their premarital agreements. That's a mistake, because it could mean that a lot or a good portion of your premarital agreement that you thought would be enforceable won't be. So let's break that down so people can understand. So basically what she's saying, if you're getting married to someone, let's say that you're the more wealthy person and you're getting married to somebody who's less wealthy, and you put in your agreement, if that person has sex with another person while we're married, then they basically lose all of their money or whatever you might put in the terms of the agreement. So when she says it's against public policy, there's just certain things you can't have in a contract because it's just not legally binding. And it's something that it does, the whole premise of getting married is that you're not going to cheat on each other. So if you're putting in a contract, if you cheat on me, it kind of goes against what a prenup is about. So don't put it in there. And once again, consult with a specialist before you do that, but that should be something definitely avoided. Right. So many people want to tell me who's at fault in the divorce. And the reality is that California is a no-fault state.
Yeah.
And what that means is California doesn't care why you're getting divorced. The state does not care why you're getting divorced.
Yeah.
And so there's no penalty for adultery under the law. The court cannot do that. And so when you're creating that penalty that otherwise is not there, it is going to be held unenforceable as against public policy, like you said.
Got it. And just so you guys know, there's no punishment for when somebody does cheat on their wife. That doesn't mean that they get a better portion of the divorce. It just means you got cheated on. You know, it sucks. It sucks to suck, but it just kind of is what it is. And then also, she mentioned before, like having independent counsel. So what it means is that, let's say I came to Nicole and I came with my girlfriend, we're looking to get married, and we wanted to have a prenup. You know, if I said, okay, Nicole's going to be my attorney, it's better for her in a prenup to not represent the both of us. It's better that my girlfriend goes to another attorney, because then the court views it as maybe a biased opinion since she's representing both of us, but she should go to a separate independent counsel, and then thus it will be more enforceable. So for those of you out there with significant, value or assets, and you want your prenup to be enforced, you really should encourage your significant other to go to somebody that you're not related to, you have no relationship with, somebody they find on their own if possible, to go ahead and be their independent counsel. That way, when later on, let's say that you get divorced and they're contesting your $40 million prenup, and they say, well, I didn't have my own independent counsel, I was pressured, you want it to be enforceable. That sound about right?
That is, yeah. We definitely want to have somebody separate from myself if I'm drafting the premarital agreement, and in our example representing you, your fiance would want to go to completely independent counsel, independent of myself or my law firm, to review the agreement with her, to explain the legal effect of that agreement. And if you're my client, I'm also going to recommend that we do a signing with a videographer present where I ask your fiance specific questions about whether they've had an opportunity to talk to their lawyer about those things. And we video on purpose so that way their demeanor is on tape. And it's clear most of the times that they're signing this willingly and voluntarily. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's very key. I know a friend that's going through a similar situation right now. A girl that, as the other side calls it, is a gold digger. She's contesting the prenup, and it's a $50 million prenup. And basically she's saying that the attorney didn't go through it with her in detail. He didn't explain it. He didn't explain anything. And I think it's going to end up getting thrown out because she initialed by every paragraph on the contract. And the attorney, my friend explained, I went over every paragraph with her. I read it page by page. But you're right. If he just had a video of this and he had the conversation even recorded, there would be no question, right? But the fact that he didn't do this, and look, this is happening six years later, and they're calling him to question this stuff. For all the attorneys listening, this is for your own protection too, right? You might get sued for malpractice later if you don't do this stuff the right way. It protects your clients, it protects you, it protects everyone involved, and it's going to really just make the process a lot easier when you do have, let's say, gold digger, whether it's male or female, on either side, trying to make these prenups disappear when they are, legally binding agreements.
Right, and the goal of the premarital agreement is to talk about what's going to happen in the event of divorce.
Yeah.
And so you shouldn't sign something that you don't want to be enforceable.
Yeah.
And likewise, if you're signing it, you should want it to be enforceable and therefore have no issue with the video.
Yeah, I agree. And some other things that I've heard before, and I would love some clarification. In a prenuptial agreement, you can limit spousal support, but you cannot limit child support. So let's talk about what is spousal support and what is child support, just so people, I'm sure they hear these terms all the time, but they might not understand what they are.
Sure. So spousal support is paid to a spouse, directly to a spouse, for their maintenance. Most of the times, we're looking at a multitude of factors to determine spousal support, but really the goal is to maintain the status quo financially for an individual who might not be able to be self-supporting on their own.
Okay.
Okay, so that's spousal support. Then you have child support, which is again, paid to a spouse, a mom or a dad.
So wait, let's go back to spousal support real quick. So spousal support will be given to somebody typically who has a lower income, correct? Or they have less money because they need assistance to support themselves because now, due to a divorce, right, they're on their own, but they were depending on this money that was being given to them regularly from the marriage. Is that correct?
Correct. So that would be in a scenario where the typical scenario is generally going to be, maybe mom was working at some point, stopped working to stay at home, take care of children, and then the divorce happens. And mom's not working because of this agreement that mom and dad had that mom wouldn't work and would care for the kids. Yeah. Well, mom's earning capacity and ability to take care of herself financially and the kids is inhibited by that period of unemployment. And so the court then will step in and say the high earner, the breadwinner, has to pay a certain amount monthly to, in my example, the mother, in order to contribute to her lifestyle that she was used to during the marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so you guys know, it goes male, female, if the woman was the breadwinner in the family and the male quit his job. And when she says earning capacity, what it means is that, she's been out of a job now for years. She might not have the skills. She has to go back and train. And not only that, but she might not have the education now required to go back to that same position. So she became dependent on this person. And they, even though it's not a written contract, they basically had an oral agreement saying, hey, I'm going to take care of the kids. You're going to take care of me. And marriage is forever. And so they now have this expectance to be taken care of forever, and they have had their life changed due to this agreement. And so now the court agrees that they should be taken care of based on what this agreement says, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then let's get into what you're saying. So child support. So child support is money that would be given to the child to help them stay. I'm going to let you break it down.
Child support's still paid to a parent. So it's paid to a parent, but for the benefit of the child. And I think that's the hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, because you think child support is going to be paid, in some way to the child. Yeah. And I hear that so much. The recipient of child support, in my case, takes the money for him or herself. Well, the reality is that the law actually says that's okay. Yeah. And what child support, the goal of that is that to try to equalize the lifestyle that the children experience in both homes. So I say, if you're dad and you feed the children filet mignon and they have an in-ground, swimming pool in your backyard, then mom gets to feed the children filet mignon and give that same in-ground swimming pool. But she might not be able to earn enough to do that. Yeah. And that's where child support steps in.
Got it. And so, you said that the money goes to the parents and then the parents give it to the kids. What if they don't give it to the kids? What happens then? Can you punish them in court, or is there nothing really you can do? No recourse?
Nothing that you can do, because again, it's the concept of it's going to the household to benefit ultimately the children.
Wild.
So it doesn't actually have to be handed to the children physically. It doesn't need to just be used for the kids' education or for their clothing. It's really about, like I said, if filet mignon's being served in your house, it's going to be served in mom's house. And if, pony rides are a typical thing in mom's house, then they're a typical thing in dad's house. We're trying to create an equilibrium.
Oh, wow. That's wild. I didn't realize that there was no recourse there.
And
so you got to hope that the mom or the dad or whoever it may be that's taking care of the children really gets a chance to do that the right way. Okay. So going back to the prenup, so those are two things. So you can limit spousal support, correct?
That's
but you
correct.
Cannot limit child support in a prenup, correct?
Right. You actually cannot negotiate around child support.
Yeah.
So that cannot go into a premarital agreement, nor can custody.
Yeah.
So custody of children, we don't put those in premarital agreements either.
Got it. And so just to kind of give people an idea, so let's say that somebody does put it in a prenup, the child support, will the entire agreement be nullified, or do you just cross that part off of it?
Well, hopefully if that happens, your lawyer has included a very important provision in the contract, in the premarital agreement, that allows the court to redline, essentially, just the portions that the court finds to be unenforceable or invalid, as opposed to getting rid of the whole thing.
What's that clause called?
That's called a severability clause. And what that is again, it allows the court to kind of take out its red pen, so to speak, and cross out the lines or paragraphs that the court finds offensive, if you will, while maintaining the rest of the agreement, if it's possible.
Got it. So for all of you attorneys out there, make sure that clause is in your contract just in case you do make a mistake is what we're getting at here.
It should definitely be in your stock agreement.
Definitely. Okay, cool. Is there any other tips or advice that you'd give people when they're going into a prenuptial agreement? Obviously they should hire somebody who's a specialist, right? And based on what your income is and how much you can afford, I think the level of your attorney is going to be. But if I would give you a piece of advice, and I'm sure that Nicole will agree with this, the prenup is probably something you should spend a little extra money on, because if you do it right, it will save you, potentially millions later. So spending the difference between maybe getting an attorney that you're like, oh, well, they're going to charge me $100 per hour. It's not that big of a deal. It's just a piece of paper. It is not just a piece of paper. This is probably could be the most important thing in your life at some point. So spend $5, $10 grand, whatever it is. I don't know. Do you have like a package price that you guys charge, or is it all hourly at your firm?
So we kind of have an interesting way of doing it. So it's a hybrid. So we do have a flat fee depending on whether we're writing or reviewing the premarital agreement to get through that initial writing or review. And then we charge hourly for any further negotiation of the agreement, any further edits. So we get it to a place where you like it if we're writing it. And then once we submit it to the other side, it's on an hourly basis from there. And then with respect to review, we'll review it, analyze it, give you our initial impressions, and to further negotiate, it would be at an hourly rate.
Okay, awesome. And then is there anything else that you'd recommend that people keep an ear out for when it comes to a prenup?
I think for me, one of the biggest things that I get pushback on and eventually have to convince a client to do is a really good financial disclosure. And the reason for that is you want to make sure that the other person signing this agreement has full knowledge of the facts, in this case, your financial information, before they enter an agreement about your financial information.
Yeah.
And so many people just say, just write whole numbers, or I don't want to go through the effort of getting, business valued or something like that. And I can promise you that it will be money well spent, and it will make a big difference if you're sitting in court having to talk about whether your premarital agreement is enforceable or not, or valid or not. It's going to make a big difference. And so if your lawyer is telling you that you should be doing this, you should do it.
Yeah.
That's really the key piece of advice.
If they're a good lawyer.
Right. And then from there, choose your lawyer wisely for this. Yeah. Because ultimately it's not just divorce, but premarital agreements also come out in probate court.
Yeah.
So, death and divorce are two areas where you're going to see your premarital agreement potentially used, and you want to make sure that you have a good one. It's kind of like a will or a trust.
Yeah.
And to that end, I think when you talk about the agreement itself, yes, you should have one, but then you don't just go put it on a shelf and forget about it. You have to live by it and review it and make sure that you're doing what it says you're going to do or not do.
Got it.
And it's not written in stone. It can be modified. So, talking about it, again, communication is key, not only when you're writing the document, but as you go through your marriage. It's important to revisit it with your spouse and make sure you're still on the same page. Things happen in life. It probably will need to be modified.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah. And so when you say modified after you're married, then it's called a postnuptial agreement, right? And it still has the same terms and it's very similar, but it just means that you did it after you got married, and that's perfectly okay, right?
That's okay, yes. So there are postnuptial agreements. Then you're married, and so there's a different relationship there, and there are some additional requirements and hoops you'll need to get through. But ultimately, again, it can be modified. It would be a postnuptial agreement. They do exist, and so you're not setting something in stone that just cannot ever change.
So now that we're getting to the point where we've talked about the prenup, obviously, guys, look, it's extremely important that you get one. Whether you have a lot of assets or not, it's going to make your life easier a lot of like later on down the road, and hopefully help you deal with if there is a divorce or not a divorce. It's kind of like peace of mind just knowing that it's there. Because I've had friends call me that they don't have assets, they don't own a home, they have their bank accounts, but they listed, what they're going to inherit from their family members could be something that's listed in these prenups, and it's just going to give you some peace of mind, and it's worth every effort to go ahead and get that done. So if you're looking into marriage, get it done. Now we're going to step into marriage. Okay, we're now there. It's the big wedding day. You go, you get your contract, from the county. I believe it's the county, not the city, from the county, and you basically are married now. So I know there's a lot of ramifications, but maybe let's get a 300 bird's eye view, kind of like look at what does it mean when you're married. It's basically a contractual agreement between you and another person, and what does it mean for you now that you've engaged in this agreement?
Well, assuming you don't have a premarital agreement.
Yeah, assuming no prenup.
If you have a premarital agreement, I don't know, you have to read your premarital agreement. But if you don't have a premarital agreement and you've opted to just have the default community property law apply, what that means is a few things. One of the biggest things is community property will exist in your marriage. What is community property? Community property is anything acquired during your marital period, and that marital period is the date of marriage to the date of separation, and not acquired by gift, devise, descent, inheritance, essentially. So if you've received something during the marriage but it's an inheritance, that's still separate property. That's not community property.
Okay.
But, for example, people will say, I earned income during the marriage from my job.
Yeah.
That's not his or hers. And I often have to tell them, no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
During the marriage, anything you earn is going to be considered community property, and your spouse is entitled to 1/2 of any community property.
Yeah, but I mean, the idea behind that is you're earning it for the benefit of the both of you, right? You're in this together. Like, you're going on this journey together. You've agreed to be married with each other. So when you earn, it's like you're earning it for the both of you, which same thing goes for like your company, right? If your company does well, the company is for the benefit of the both of you. And not only that, but, my understanding, and you can explain this a little bit better, is when you own a company, right? And let's say that I invest in another company. I'm not the only person that now owns that interest. My wife also would own that interest in the company, right, at the same time, because now we're partners in this, and it goes not just translating to certain aspects of your life, but every aspect of your life.
And that's one thing that is really confusing, truly, and hard to conceptualize for a lot of people. So you have your own business.
Yeah.
That business right now is separate property.
Yeah.
But if you get married, all of a sudden your efforts in that business without a premarital agreement are going to potentially open up a community property claim for your wife at that time.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. If you acquire a business during the marriage, that too is going to be considered community property, again, unless it was inheritance.
Yeah.
Now, people will say, but I'm the only shareholder. I'm 100% shareholder, and here's, the shareholder agreement or the stock that has been issued. I'm sorry, but that doesn't mean that you're 100% owner in that business.
Yeah.
And that is a hard pill to swallow for somebody who didn't go see a family law attorney before they got married.
Yeah, I'm going to walk through two scenarios and you tell me if I'm correct. So, like, for example, in my scenario, guys, so let's say that I end up getting divorced later on down the road. So I've worked up to my business now for the last 5 years. We've had my firm. So all of the work that I've put in up to this point has been my separate property. But the day I get married, let's say I get married tomorrow, from this point forward, it's going to be considered community property. So when she said in the prenup you should get a valuation on your business value, because if I got a valuation and it's in my prenup that everything up until this point is separate property, I would be able to know exactly down to the penny what is my separate property if later on down the road we have to sell the business or we get divorced and I have to pay her out, because now she's a shareholder in my company. So that's one scenario. Did that sound about right?
About right, yes.
Okay, that sounds about right. So basically, it's very important to keep things in mind mind, a marriage is very serious, and you're not just combining one aspect of your life. It's just not like you and the kid. That's it. Your child is your community property. It's everything in your life now gets combined, and everything that was before, sometimes things from before can also become community property, and you can do things like transmutations, right? And do you want to explain what that is?
Sure, yes. So a transmutation is essentially a written document that provides for the change in what we call the character of property. And what I mean by that is separate property and community property. And you can do it any which way you want, but essentially it would be taking, let's call it a house, and I own a house prior to marriage, and I decide one day that I want to make that home community property with my husband. To do that, I can sign a deed that would transfer the property to both of us as community property, and there you go, you have a transmutation. So the house was once my separate property, and because I signed that deed, I've transferred it to my husband's community property and my community property.
Right, and you can do that with pretty much anything. Let's say that I was gifted, say some jewelry or some paintings that are worth a lot of money, and I don't want them to just be my property, right? Even though they're gifted, it's still separate property. Separate property means that it's one person's instead of the marriage's. But you can then basically create a contract between you and your spouse, which then transfers it from being separate property to community property. So that way when you pass away, let's say you don't have a will or something along those lines, it makes sure that it goes to the marriage and they can do what they deem as fit with it, correct?
Right, and some things, Joe, that people really struggle with is it doesn't necessarily have to be a contract. So like I said, it could be a deed. That's kind of the one that we see a lot of in family law. But it could also be an estate plan. So you can have a trust that says everything in this trust that I place in this trust name is going to be community property. And by virtue of doing that and then changing title to something into the trust, you've essentially transmuted property. So don't think that it has to be a contract specifically. It needs to be in writing, and there needs to be express intent to transfer. But it could be a birthday card. I could give my husband a birthday card that says, all the property I own today, I love you so much, and I am transferring it from separate property to community property, and half of it is now you're a sweetheart, and my husband better save that birthday card.
That's awesome. No, so I didn't realize that you could do it in so many different vehicles. So she's saying you could do it in a deed, in a trust, in a will. And birthday card is really just, there needs to be intent, it needs to be written, and you need to want to actually do what you're saying that you want to do in the writing, correct?
Right, and then we would look, of course, there could be defenses to that, and we would look at the factors surrounding it. If my husband was twisting my arm and sitting on me while I was writing the card, then maybe then it wouldn't be enforceable. But generally speaking, as to form, that's what you should be looking for.
Got it. And then also, like, same thing, if she was intoxicated while she was writing this birthday card and she's drunk, then the intent thing goes to state of mind. And if you're intoxicated, you can't have a proper state of mind to write a contract, so the contract would thus be null and void. So a lot of factors go into things, and that's why it's so important to speak to independent counsel. You just want to make sure you're not messing it up, because the repercussions are huge later. Imagine she actually meant to give all of her property to her spouse, and then she dies, and then now it goes into probate. And if you guys don't know anything about probate, it's a nightmare. Most of your property is going to go to the government. They're going to take most of it in taxes. No one's going to get everybody that you meant to get things is not going to get what was intended to go to them. And it goes through a very specific, long process that could take years. They could die before they get what you promised to give them or what you actually meant to give them. So having these contracts, having these prenups, having these agreements in place is going to save not just you headaches if you end up getting a divorce, but it's going to save your loved ones a lot of headaches that you might be leaving behind because you've passed on to the next life.
Right. And again, super important to talk to a lawyer. Don't write a greeting card. It could work, but the greeting card is probably not the best way to handle the situation. So if you've got a greeting card, take it to the lawyer and see how you could really formalize your transmutation. But otherwise, important to make sure that the point of the conversation is understand that the little things you're doing during your marriage could have a big impact on your rights and obligations.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so we've talked about, after you get married, basically now everything from your business, and now along comes your children, right? And so we kind of talked about, a little bit about like what are the what are the long-term effects of when you're going through a divorce, right? You're fighting a custody battle. And so when you're fighting this custody battle, what are some factors that are taken into consideration about your children? Who does the kid go with? Why do they go with this kid? And how does that go about?
So there are really two types of custody. One is legal custody, and legal custody is the right to make decisions regarding what I would consider the major items that a parent needs to make decisions about: the health, safety, welfare of the child.
Yeah.
So you're talking about education, where the children go to school, where the children go to the doctor, what procedures are performed on the child with respect to medical procedures. So those kind of things fall into the legal custody bucket, if you will.
Okay.
And that could be sole or it could be joint. So, both parents could have the right and obligation to make those decisions, and that would be joint legal custody. Or one parent could be given that designation, and that would be sole legal custody. The second bucket, which I think people more think about when they think about custody, is physical custody. Mm-hmm. And that is day to day, hour to hour, who has the responsibility for the children.
Okay.
And that's really looking at health, safety, and welfare of the child. Those are the three top things. We refer to it as the best interest of the child. What arrangement is in the best interest of the child is going to be different for each family. Each family dynamic and the children within that dynamic. It runs the gamut on what's in the best interest of the child, and there's no set way of determining that. It's really fact specific and family to family specific.
Of course. Okay. And basically, depending on the situation, can lead to the results, which is who will get custody. We'll get there a little bit later. So, now we've had the marriage, everything's fine, and then suddenly, now there's nothing, it's not fine. And what are some of the biggest telltale signs that you can see a divorce coming just from your experience?
Telltale signs. For me, one is, it seems, and again, I haven't gone through divorce. I've just heard a lot of stories about it. But
I can imagine.
From what I can see, one is communication just stops. So you're living a parallel life almost. You're not making decisions together. You're not talking about your feelings. It's all just stopped. That's one sign that your divorce is probably over. The second one tends to be a shift in finances. So, traditionally you did things one way with respect to finances, and all of a sudden you're being told that things are going to operate differently. Maybe your credit card, if you have a credit card that is typically used by you for expenses, and all of a sudden your spouse tells you, we're going to limit your credit card to X amount of dollars, or we're going to, I see a lot on TV and I can't help it but say, oh, they're getting ready for divorce in these reality TV shows because they're reducing their lifestyle conveniently as their relationship is like going bonkers.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden you live in this immaculate house and you're being told you need to downsize to an apartment, that might be a sign that somebody's divorce planning. So they're planning to show a reduced lifestyle before it's technically over.
Got it, because they don't want to set the standard for when they get divorced. So the standard, I guess, for the divorce is like, what is the lifestyle at that time, or is it like an overall scale? We
try to look at, usually, generally speaking, I'll have my expert review 4 years and then strategically kind of make decisions from there on what makes sense for this family.
Yeah.
But I would say, no less than 2 years we're probably looking at.
Got it.
So 2 years from your date of separation.
Got it. Okay.
So if you see that kind of happening, you might, think, well, what's really going on with my spouse, and is it really a financial reason that we're downsizing, or is maybe he or she divorce planning? So that's one that I typically see. Also, a spouse who all of a sudden decides that they want to take over the finances and they want to get involved out of nowhere, that could be a sign.
Got it, because they want to see what's going on, or they want to make sure that everything's in the right places for them to like control it.
Exactly. And generally speaking, what we're talking about here is a power struggle. So all of a sudden, the dynamic switches in your relationship. That's probably a sign. Obviously, the big ones are like, all of a sudden you have no more sexual relationship. People that come to me, odds are they have not had sex with their spouse in some time. It's just not happening anymore. You're living in separate bedrooms. That's probably a good sign. Or you've been moved to the couch to sleep. That's another sign. And I would say, again, with that dynamic shift, if all of a sudden one spouse is overly involved in the children's lives when they didn't used to be, that might be a sign that they went to a lawyer and the lawyer said, you better get involved or custody is going to be a fight.
Yeah. How interesting. I didn't realize that so many factors go into it. And so, COVID's been going on obviously for about 1.5 years now. And with COVID going on, do you see more divorces because people are locked up with each other and they don't have any escape, such as the normal day-to-day anymore? Have you seen the numbers skyrocket? I know in California it was already 50% was like the divorce rate, but have you seen more divorces now since people are like with each other all the time?
I've seen more contested divorces now. So, domestic violence has spiked. I've not done as much domestic violence in probably all of my career as I've seen this year.
Okay.
So huge spike in domestic violence.
Domestic violence means like somebody's attacking another person in the relationship or hurting them.
These days in California, it's broad. So it's not just an issue of I'm striking you, I'm hitting you, I'm harassing you, but it could be that I'm disturbing your peace. That could be grounds for domestic violence.
Can you give an example of like what a mild disturbing the peace would be that would be justification for a divorce?
Sure, that would be something like unwanted text messages and emails excessively to the point where you've told this person, stop texting me, stop emailing me, and it just continues in a pattern that truly disturbs your peace.
Like, where are you? What are you doing? Yeah.
Showing up to your job or your place of employment unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Things like that disturb people's peace, and it's been found to be domestic violence in California. And very recently, the legislature changed the law on domestic violence to include coercive control, which has always been a concept that divorce attorneys have known about, and we see in a lot of divorcing families.
Yeah.
It's now been codified as domestic violence as well. And what that means is coercive control is where maybe somebody's financially controlling you, or they're controlling you in a way to coerce you to do something or act a certain way when you don't want to, but you feel trapped. And if you feel trapped in a relationship and stuck, like somebody is controlling you, you may be a victim of coercive control and may be potentially somebody who could seek a restraining order against that other person.
Wild. Okay, I didn't realize all those things were going on. So we're dealing with a more violent climate right now, whether it's like mentally or physically, and we're probably seeing a little bit of spike in divorces at this time. So do you, when clients come to you, do you guys like advocate for them to try to fix it? Do you guys like try to get them through therapy, or is it always just like, no, like by the time they're to you, they're like, I'm done, I'm moving on with my life, I don't want this anymore?
So it's fluid and it's different for every family. There are some that come in and are like, I need to get out of Dodge, file this document, and I need to be done. And those are, you can see it, they're done, and that's it. In that case, it's clear there's not going to be any helping the relationship. There are other times where people come into the office and they're questioning what to do. They're trying to seek information.
Yeah.
Or honestly, sometimes it's just been a really bad fight and the instant reaction is just
divorce.
To get divorced. And in those scenarios, and I've had them come up. One example I always use is recently with politics, the way it was, everything was so polarized. Somebody came to my office and wanted to divorce their spouse because of their political beliefs. And I thought, okay, before we go through with this, and it will be costly to go through it, perhaps you should wait until the election is over, slow things down, see if you can go to therapy and work through your issues before you go through this divorce.
Yeah.
So there are times where I will see that there is an opportunity to try to get this couple to reconcile or see past one fight. And of course, I would promote that 110%.
Got it. Okay. So now we're at the point where people have come to you. It's not working. You know, they're like, I want to get this divorce. What are the top things that you would tell? Like, let's say I came to you, I'm like, hey, I'm going to get a divorce. I don't care what you say. I'm done with this relationship. How do I best prepare myself? And obviously you're going to be biased to helping me in the best way possible. What are the things that you'd recommend for preparing for a divorce to get me the best result?
So every case is different, depending on what I refer to as whether you're the in-spouse or the out-spouse.
Like the breadwinner or the not breadwinner?
And not always the breadwinner, because sometimes, oddly enough, the breadwinner is not the in-spouse because they just make the money and somebody else is controlling it. So the in-spouse to me is the person that has their hand on the pulse of the finances, as well as their hand on the pulse of the documents, the key documents that I would need. That's the in-spouse. And that in-spouse has a lot of the information I need already, so it's more compiling certain records for me. So then I could start helping you strategize. With respect to children, always 110%, my advice is going to be the same. Your children are your top priority right now, not what you want, not what he or she wants, what they need. Yeah. And that's always going to be my advice to every single client that I have with respect to the kids. But with respect to finances, if you've got the out spouse, the conversation is going to be different, and it's going to be more surrounded around what can you get your hands on, what professionals does your spouse work with that we can try to request documents from. And in those scenarios, it might be more homework of trying to get your hands on key documents in a strategic way.
Got it. So it's easier, obviously, if they're the person in control of the finances or the one with the finances, and you can really guide them to protect their assets. But, just from your own perspective, is it better just to not tell them to start hiding stuff or to putting stuff separately? Because in the end, it's going to just be more of a headache. Or do you advise people to be start putting this stuff separately and hiding it?
So I never advise to hide. I think hide the ball tactics, which is something we refer to a lot in civil litigation, where, people have to request things very specifically in order to obtain the information. Yeah. In family law, it's totally different. So yes, there are formal procedures. It's a lawsuit at the end of the day that you can obtain documents and records. But the policy of the law in family law is the free flow and exchange of information, because frankly it should have been provided during the marriage. Not to hide information, to actually try to the best of your ability to amicably get through this divorce, do it in a way that's not contentious. One of my biggest things is divorce with dignity, divorce with respect for yourself, for the process, and for your family, even if that is your ex-spouse, because if you've got kids, guess what? You're stuck with that person. And not through the age of 18, because your children are going to get married, they're going to have kids, and you're both going to want to be there for those key events. So to me, that's an important part of the divorce process, is to really do it with dignity and respect.
Yeah, because you always hear those stories of that SOB, he hid everything under the sun. I didn't find anything. He put it all in his mother's name, or some crazy stuff like that. And, I guess those attorneys kind of get names for themselves later on down the road. But there are ways, of course, to be shady and to hide your things. But I'm sure as a forensic specialist like yourself, you're able to drag those things back. And is there vehicles to do that kind of stuff?
There is. So not only is there supposed to be a free flow of information, but there's subpoena power in divorce, so we can subpoena records. There are experts that can be hired, forensic accountants, to sift through the bank accounts, the credit cards, and trace things back. The requests for documents, depositions, all of these things still happen in divorce litigation. The goal is to reduce how much of that needs to happen, but it's still available. And for those that think that they've gotten away with something by hiding, if you're caught, 100% of that asset can be awarded to the other spouse. So you really need to be careful. And a key example of that is a woman in a case had won the lottery, and she didn't disclose it. And then the lottery commission contacted the spouse about it, and of course it was news to him. So he ends up going to court and winning 100% of the lottery winnings
No
because
way.
she hid it. So don't hide things. It doesn't help you.
I did not know that. That's awesome. So, okay, that's great to know. So for those of you out there, if you do get screwed by your spouse or, something on the other end happens, you can hire a great attorney and you can get everything that you were entitled to. And, that kind of speaks to a lot of people that get taken advantage of out there, right? Like if you do get taken advantage of, make sure you go find the right legal counsel. Even if it costs you your savings, sometimes it's worth it in the long run because you're going to get protected. I mean, I've even heard of situations in divorces where the poor spouse can't afford an attorney and then they get awarded by the judge that's the other spouse, the breadwinner, has to pay for all of their legal fees. And I've seen that happen many times.
Yes, so there is a code section in the California Family Code that does allow for attorney fees to be paid by the more advantaged spouse. And what the code section essentially says is that both parties are to have parity when it comes to legal representation. So if there's a disparity in income or access to funds to pay for an attorney, and the other side can make a reasonable contribution toward those attorney's fees of the disadvantaged spouse, the court must order attorney's fees paid. And, I get so many phone calls about that, Joe, where someone says, I can't afford a lawyer and, he or she has presented me with this document and I just have to sign it. And I say, no, you do not have to sign it. And we can go get you attorney's fees at the very least to have me review that document and negotiate that document. So even if, you're not a case where, you're $100 million, even if you're just middle class, lower middle class, that code section still applies to you. So don't sign anything without getting legal representation or trying to request attorney's fees from the other side to do that.
Okay, very interesting. Okay, so now we're at the point, people are coming to you. They're like, we're ready to get divorced, and the proceedings have started. Now, of course, there's a very long road, and there might be a shorter road. Why don't we give, once again, a bird's eye view of what this road to divorce looks like. Let's talk about the mediation road, and then let's talk about the actual litigation road.
I would say there's 3 roads.
Okay, better.
So the 3 roads for me are one is going to be a litigated case. That is, you're just not going to see eye to eye, you can't get along, and you're going to have to seek court intervention at every step of the way. That's a litigated case. The middle road is what I consider a negotiated case, and that is you're not going to mediation with your spouse and going to sit in a room with a mediator where you're on opposite sides of the spectrum and they're trying to get you to the middle, but you're going to have a lawyer. The other side is going to have a lawyer, and you're going to negotiate a deal that makes sense for the two of you. And I think that scenario, to me, is the preferred scenario. Always. Because one, you have independent legal counsel with you negotiating, so you're not negotiating in the blind. Presumably, there's parity between the lawyers. So, the lawyers both know the law well and are negotiating on behalf of their respective clients to prepare an agreement that's acceptable to both, because I don't think anyone will ever be happy or win in a divorce, but it's acceptable and they can live with it.
It's not a
win. That's the best case scenario. Mediation is another alternative available, and I do recommend it in some cases. In some cases, I don't. And what mediation is essentially a mediator, generally a lawyer would be the preferred mediator in a divorce case. They are not the lawyer for either side. Their only mission is to get you from opposite sides of the spectrum to the middle. And that's something that I think people miss. This person is not representing either party's interest, nor applying the law in many respects. They're just trying to take the emotion down and get you to the middle. And so if you're going to go that route, then you should still hire a lawyer before you sign that agreement that's prepared in mediation. And in some cases, I said mediation wouldn't work, Joe. That's because in some cases, the dynamic is such that someone is just going to take advantage of the weaker spouse. And in that scenario, I don't want to see people in mediation.
No, for sure. I mean, whether it's the weaker spouse or both spouses hate each other, there's just mediation's a very specific scenario, right? And it's my favorite vehicle to settle cases because it's usually where one side has leverage over the other. But you're right. A lot of times in mediations, it's not both sides coming equally to the table. It's one side coming to the table because they know they've lost. They're just trying to lose at a discount, and trying to like work it that way. But I didn't even know about the third option in divorce, which is just coming to the table, both attorneys with both sides, and just kind of negotiating it out loud, which I think is the right way to do it if you can. But from my basic understanding of the few divorces that I've done, both sides hated each other, and there was no amicable resolution. We had to take it to the court to get approval on everything. And when you're fighting over things like your rug or like your table, like things like that, that it's not going to end well for everyone. The only person that really ends up winning that scenario is the attorneys, because they're making their hourly rate. They're stoked. They're going to go and drag this on as long as possible. I mean, drag it on is not the right term, but, if you're not willing to amicably resolve the matter, they're going to just keep doing their job. And they're, of course, not going to be mad about keep racking up their hourly bill. And that's why it's also very important that you choose an attorney that's on your side. You want an attorney that's going to try to push you in the direction of resolving it. You don't want an attorney that's just going to drag it on for 4 or 5 years. What's the longest divorce you've ever seen?
I was personally involved at the end of a case that involved a 20-year separation. So it was 20 years from the date of filing to the date of divorce.
How much assets was that? Like how much were in
it was a very high net worth
case.
Got
very high net worth case.
Yes.
So for those of you that don't believe in prenups, this is a reason that you want to believe in prenups. 20 years later, they're still dealing with this. And look, the assets are obviously very important to it, but forget about the assets for a second. It's the emotional anguish that you as an individual are going to have to go through for 10, 20 years, 5 years, a couple years, whatever it is. One day is already too much if you had just properly set things up the right way. So just remember, when you're going through divorce, not only is it emotionally exhausting, every aspect of it obviously sucks, but the worst part about it all is just that it sucks away portions of your energy. It sucks away your attention. It sucks away, things that you could be putting towards moving forward, starting new. And I'm a true believer in the energy that you put into things, what you're going to get out of it. So on the other spectrum, right, do you ever see beautiful divorces is what, some people call them, right? Or an amicable divorce where people are like, okay, great, we're just going to split everything. You guys resolve it. And I know sometimes you can even have one attorney handle the divorce for the both of you. Do you see that often, or is that very, very rare?
I would say that's rare. If one attorney is handling the entire thing, there's no way that they could represent both of you. So you should already be questioning what's going on and who that lawyer is actually representing if you're in that scenario. More likely than not, though, we see the negotiated route like I talked about, where everyone comes to the table, and even if you don't see eye to eye with your spouse, the lawyers can see eye to eye. And don't discount the ability of the lawyers to work this out a lot of the times. But if you can't, the lawyers can actually bring in a mediator, usually a retired judge, to help the lawyers see eye to eye. And at that point, it's our job to instruct our clients on what a good negotiated settlement would be. That's going to save you so much time, so much energy, so much heartache. And I have to say, right after I got married, I was a divorce attorney before I got married. And then I got married, and I'm sitting in the courtroom back from my honeymoon. And I had sat in a courtroom before. But I'll tell you, all of a sudden it registered with me, wow, I'm cross-examining my client's husband today in court. And that could be... I can't imagine what that would be like to have my husband on a witness stand being cross-examined over the ins and outs of our marriage. It is emotionally draining. It's emotionally draining for the parties and equally as much for the lawyers who are trying to help you through it. We're doing all we can to try to keep you out of that witness stand if we can help it.
Yeah, when you say the ins and outs, you mean the ins and outs, every detail of your life, from what you spend, where you go, what you do, who you do it with, right? You guys really get into the nitty-gritty.
When you stopped, in some cases, when you separated, the date you separated, which we talked about earlier, is very important because it's going to stop the economic community. So on that date of separation, you're no longer creating community property anymore. So the date of separation often becomes a contested issue. People for one reason or another, want it to be a different date. And then we're getting into conversations about when you stopped having sex, when you started going on dating websites, when you stopped doing the laundry, or, whatever the case might be.
Why might some of those things be important, like knowing those things, just like to show when they stop being in a relationship?
That's right. So the law says that the date of separation is we're really looking at when a spouse communicated an intent for that marriage to be final, and then their actions were consistent with that. And that's where we look at the actions of the parties. And because so many people have litigated over this issue, us lawyers are looking at the things that have been important to the appellate courts and the trial courts previously, and things like vacation, sex, when you stopped or started doing certain things, that's really going to be fact specific to your specific relationship. But certainly we're going to be looking into your personal life more than you might have imagined in a courtroom while you're on a witness stand.
Got it. So they're really diving deep in there and they're getting all the details. All right. So now we are at the end of the divorce. You guys have gone through the process. You guys have finally come to a resolution. Let's talk about, what are some of the most expensive divorces you've seen? What are the costs? Do they cost tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions?
I've seen cases in the millions, yes, with experts and forensic accountants, both sides spending millions on attorneys, forensic accountants, other experts, vocational experts, custody experts. And when you get obviously into those amounts, the cases are super complex.
Yeah, of course.
I think I've looked it up once recently, like what is the average cost of a divorce in California? Because everyone always asks me that. Yeah. And really, it depends, again, on those, who your spouse is, who you are, who the other attorney is. What of the three paths that we talked about today you plan on taking? I want to say I saw a figure like $15,000 is the average divorce in California, what that's going to cost. And I would say that is really assuming that you're amicably handling things and maybe one or two issues are at issue. But if you're getting into that litigated zone, you're going to be well above that. Yeah,
that's probably a divorce that you don't have any kids, you just have very limited assets, probably don't own any homes, there's nothing really major to contest there. Right. I mean, the bottom line is that basically you guys should plan ahead, right? The best offense is defense. If you have a prenup, you'll save yourself all these headaches later on, and not just a prenup, a good prenup with a good attorney, and you're going to save yourself tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands, maybe millions if you're that client listening to this podcast later on down the road.
And do you know what else I find with the premarital agreement? I find that marriages that need to end sooner when there's a premarital agreement, because there's not a fear of the unknown, what's going to happen, because they set that out already, what was going to happen.
Got it. That's good to know. And then most people will just linger on because they're just like, oh, well, what's going to happen with this property? How are we going to separate it? It's going to be a headache going through divorce. It's going to be a headache getting the attorneys involved. And when you have it already laid out, now just people get to go on to the next stage of their life. And, if there's one thing I think as being an attorney, you just realize, like, people in relationships, it's not always the right relationship. And that's okay. But many times people will stay in that relationship indefinitely. Well, what are we going to do about the kids? What are we going to do here? And if it's not laid out and you haven't had that conversation, it becomes a much harder conversation to have later on down the road.
Right, and that's why, again, back to that premarital agreement, it is just crucial.
Yeah, absolutely important. All right, so what I want to do now is I kind of want to shift gears. So I want to ask you, I want to start off with, who is the worst client you've ever had? What did they teach you, and what did you learn from it?
I would say the worst client I've ever had, it's more of a profile.
Yeah.
And that is the client who tells you half-truths, mistruths, and is just a bad historian or is hiding information. Okay. Those are, to me, the profile of the worst client.
Yeah.
And what they've taught me is to do a lot of digging with my client when they say something that just seems a little off or like there might be more. Early on in my career, I would take what the client said for gold. Then one or two times you get burned on that. And you're in court, and it's in black and white. Your client was lying to you or didn't tell you the whole truth.
Yeah.
And you're left in a really handicapped position in trial. And that's not a good feeling to have as a litigator. It's a horrible feeling to have.
Yeah.
And
it's like somebody stabs you in the gut.
Well, stabs you in the gut and also then expects you to perform.
Yeah, figure it out.
You know, it's like I can only do so much when I'm presented with information the day of trial.
Yeah.
That's going to be a problem for your lawyer. And so that's really, for me, what that's taught me is when I'm interviewing a client to prepare for trial or gather evidence, I cross-examine my clients, and I tell them up front, I'm going to do that because the other lawyer is going to do it.
Yeah, he's
and
going
I'm
to crush you.
Pick apart everything that you say, and I'm going to ask documentation for proof of everything you say and whether you have it, because ultimately you're going to appreciate that I did that up front as opposed to having the other lawyer do it.
No, I agree with you entirely. And it's tough. And so I guess I kind of want to try to get into the mindset. Why do you think those clients do that? Are they liars? Are they horrible people? Do they just not understand what the repercussions are? Or are they like that SOB that I talked about earlier where they're just trying to hide things because they think it's going to get them out of having to share it?
It's hard for me to get in the minds of a divorcing client, and everyone is different. I think there truly are innocent mistakes in the process where people just innocently forget something, maybe don't tell you the whole truth because they're embarrassed a lot of the times, and they hope it doesn't come to light. Those are really the ones that I think happen more often than not. And then I think there are truly sometimes people who think, the other person won't find it, or they don't care if the other person finds it because it will be after the fact.
Yeah.
And, I try to think the best of everyone. And I think those types of clients are far and few between. I think it's more innocent mistakes sometimes.
Got it. Okay, and so I've known you for a while now, and you're probably one of the best litigators that I've met, and you just kind of have like a very analytical mind when you go over things, and you speak like very matter-of-factly, but it's not matter-of-factly, it's just like having this grasp of knowledge of the law. So what do you think are the habits or the skill sets that make you one of the top litigators? Like, what do you do differently than all the other attorneys out there that are not ranked in the top 10 family law attorneys? Like, why are you so much better than everybody else? Not to say it in like a gloating way, but why do you think that is?
Well, for me, it's a lot of hard work and training of all of my staff, first off, whether it be associate attorneys working with me, assistants, paralegals, whatever the case might be. Everyone's trained on what I refer to as the Bremer White way. And that really is to do a good job, to do a thorough job, to make sure you cross your T's and dot your I's. And most of all, try to predict what the other side is doing and be a step ahead of them. And if you're doing everything procedurally proper, and you're crossing your T's and you're dotting your I's and you're organized about that, and your team is organized about that, and there's synergy there, you're a powerhouse and you're a force to be reckoned with, because you're organized, you're detailed, and you're on it, and you're anticipating what the next step is before the other side is. And that is hard work, especially in divorce litigation. It's about putting in the time and effort. And I think one of my best qualities is I'm naturally skeptical and I'm naturally inquisitive. And so for me, those two qualities in litigation really make me skeptical of any piece of information my client gives me or the other side gives me, and I'm going to dig for what I need. And I'm going to dig for the law that's applicable and make the best arguments for my client, and have my team doing that too. So those are the things that I think are important in being a good litigator. And of course, listening to your client, getting that story out, and sifting through those facts and knowing the law. That's the biggest thing. People don't do their homework. Yeah.
So I want to kind of like dissect a couple of those. So the first thing you said, the team thing. So I'm reading a book right now called The Culture Code with my firm. We have like our own book club going on there. And it talks about a lot of the greatest companies ever. And they don't like, okay, so usually one person will look like the all-star, right? So you look like the all-star, but all of those people that are the all-stars in these hugely successful companies will say, it's my team. It's everybody works together and everybody lifts each other up, because it's not just one person. It's kind of like they know if they drop the ball, there's going to be 10 other people to jump jump in and assist any way possible. And it's really creating that sense of trust with everybody around you. And the more you know you trust your team, the more it's like that all-star gets lifted higher and higher and higher, because everybody else is like a support system for that person that's really out there crushing it. And so it's very interesting that you said that, because I'm seeing it, right? And the more that your team gets on the same page and you learn your processes and you really train people the right way, everybody's going to grow exponentially, because it's almost like osmosis to everyone around you, and everybody grows together, and then you're just at this elevated level. Is that kind of like how things go at your company?
Yeah, especially, I have an individual team that works with me primarily, and I'll say especially with my team, I'm looking at knowing not only me, I want them to know me, and I want them to know my strengths and weaknesses, and I want them to know each other's, and I want to be openly talking about that.
Yeah.
And strategically having people work on pieces of the litigation that they're going to do their best at. And that might not always be me. Some things I'm not as good at as one of my associates, and I will be the first one to admit that and ask them to step in and help me.
No, 100%. You know Ray Dalio, the Bridgewater, one of the greatest investors of all time. So at his company, one of the things that he said made them the most successful is he has everybody take these personality tests called like the Briggs tests or whatever, right? And they then put those personalities on baseball cards. And then whenever you like reach out to somebody within the company, are they a type A extrovert? Are they really good at this? What are their greatest skill sets? And I think really defining it for people and letting people know what you're good at is so important, right? Like with my team, I'm very good at like big picture visionary type stuff. And I tell my team, hey, if I send you a document, please read it down to the period, and please edit my grammar, because sometimes I'm just going through things and I'm going to get the big picture stuff, but you need to do those minuscule details. And when you like communicate that stuff, that way people know what to expect, what not to expect, and how to support you. Is that something that you guys do with your teams?
Right. So we do the DISC assessment, which is what my team used. Is similar. And I actually have a big poster board of the DISC and where we all fell on it.
Awesome.
And we go back and remind ourselves of that frequently.
Yeah.
And one of my associates during COVID, I could tell because I had done that DISC assessment, she's not getting what she needs. And that is collaboration and other things that this particular person, based on where she assessed from a personality standpoint, she needed. And so we had to adjust what we were doing as far as how I was working with her so that she could feel that and see that. And, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have caught that. Maybe I would just think she was slacking off or whatnot. But it's really important to know what everyone on the team needs, and also what they're good at and what they're not so good at, and being open about it. And once we did that, I just saw major improvement in the way, again, we had that synergy going, and it's like a well-oiled machine at that point. And you're working together toward a common goal. But you're all doing something different in the process.
Yeah, no, it's super important. I mean, like, it's important to also recognize that people communicate in different ways, right? And especially when you're the boss. I mean, you're a partner at a huge firm. So when you communicate to the people that are lower than you, the way that you do it, like some people respond to aggressiveness. They talk about like some of the greatest tactics in life if you want to have great success is mirroring people. But mirroring is probably it doesn't sound like a fun word, right? It sounds like you're copying or being a copycat, but it's really just kind of reflecting the way that person's demeanor is probably a better way of saying it. So like, for example, you talk to me all super excited and you're all uppity and you seem like you've taken some Adderall or something. I'm super stoked about that person. I get 10 times more energized. But then you walk up to somebody with like lower energy and somebody that's more calm, and you want to like almost like speak to them and relate to them that same way, and they feel more comfortable. They feel safe. And it's all about sending these like trust and safe signals to your employees. So it's good to see that you're doing that with your team, because like you said, sometimes people just get shut off. They don't even know how to communicate back with you because they're scared, they're not sure. And then once you start sending all those trust signals, all those safe signals, they're going to work harder for you, they're going to want to support you, and just those little subtle changes will make a huge difference. And that took you learning about your client, or not about your client, about your employee, and finding out what their needs are and what they want.
Right. And truly, it is going to change the way you progress. And one of the biggest mistakes I made early on was thinking you could do it all yourself. And when you're litigating massive cases, you cannot do it all by yourself.
Nope.
And that means delegating to people that you trust and you know what they need from you, and they know what they need from you, and they can ask you for that, and sometimes you just see a subtle need for it, and because you've done that assessment, you know that, and you can step in and help them in a way that's meaningful to them, which might be completely different from what I need.
No, I agree with you entirely. I mean, that's part of the reason that I work with some of the top firms in the country, right? I recognize where my skill set goes, and if I was at a huge firm, I probably wouldn't be partnering with other firms to like work on cases with them. But I know what my skill set is, and when I get to that certain level, I'll partner with the person who's the number one truck, accident attorney in the country, or somebody who is the number one brain injury attorney in the country, because it's better to work and make sure that you have a team that can support every type of matter.
Right, right.
So let's kind of get into the next part too. You kind of talked about being skeptical with people. I think that's probably one of the number one skill sets of just being an attorney. You don't want to take anybody's word for granted, and you don't want to just assume and sit on your laurels. You always want to kind of like inspect everything and be skeptical and be like, oh, maybe he is lying. And it's sad. It's kind of like the opposite of mentality of like what it means to like trust the world and be out there. But I don't think that's going to get you very far in our profession.
When I took the DISC assessment, and I now know you can't fail a behavioral assessment, but man, did I think, holy moly, I've got quite the personality going. And one of the personality traits that came up in me on the DISC was a natural skepticism. And I don't know if that's from just birth or growing up in New York or what it is, but at the end of the day, that skepticism is what helps me go and keep going. That and my competitive nature and my desire to drive and really get results makes me uncover those rocks and see what's there, because not everything is always what it seems. And again, I want to know that before I get to trial if I can help it.
I gotcha. And then in regards to the law, you said knowing the law really well. I mean, are you sitting there just reading law books, or are you just like you're learning as you practice, and it's just the more you practice, the more you learn, or is it mentors? Like, what do you think is the greatest way to really get ahead in knowing the law better than anybody else?
So I had a mentor early on who was a judge who was passed, and he said to me in my first year of practice, I see something in you, kid, but you need to go read the Rudder Guide. And if you know the Family Law Rudder Guide is the three binders that are each like 5 inches thick. And I said, this guy's crazy. He wants me to read this whole Rudder Guide. Well, I read it. And it took me a good year to get through, but I read it. And in doing that, I learned a lot about the law. I obviously had hands-on experience, and then added to that was the specialist exam and all the other courses that I take. But at the end of the day, I didn't just do that once. Every time an issue comes up in a case, I go back and I review it. Has the law changed? And I need to review this differently. And every time you review the law, I think you pick up another piece of it based on the case and the facts that you have before you. So I never take for granted that I know the law. I'm always checking on myself and making sure that, again, I'm crossing my T's and dotting my I's when it even comes to knowing the law, and then how to apply it, how it's been applied. And that's where mentors can help greatly, not only in how I might think the law should be applied to my facts, but oftentimes I'll go to my trusted mentors and say to them, here's the law, here's my facts, what do you think? Pick my arguments apart. And that's where I think, again, working at a firm that I work at, being big enough to have those opportunities to what we call round table those issues, that is a big benefit as well.
That's very interesting that you say that. I have a Rudder's Guide, and I have not read it in detail. I look through it when I need to refresh on the law, but maybe I'll make that as one of my chores for this year not chores, but the blessings that I get to spend time reading it, and I'll spend time just reading it here and there and maybe get through it in a year or so myself. It's not a bad idea.
You will be amazed at how much you actually retain and remember. And even if you don't remember specifically, you'll say, man, I remember reading something about that, and I think this, let me go look, where you would have never identified that issue before. Yeah, no,
it's definitely multiple volumes. For those of you that don't know what it is, the Rudder Guides, there's basically guidebooks, and they're huge binders that break down every aspect of specific categories of law, whether it's personal injury, family law, probate law, estate planning. It really breaks it down for you down to the most minuscule detail, and these books are no joke. And they're kind of ways for you to go back and refresh on different topics within those specific categories. So I'm going to challenge myself to go ahead and read through that, which is good.
Start chapter by chapter. That's what I did. And then I still do it. So I had surgery a few years ago, and my partner said, what are you going to do? I can't imagine like what a Nicole does in recovery from surgery because you're always moving. Yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to reread the Rudder Guide on fiduciary duties. And she was like, only you would do that. But
for sure,
that's what makes you you.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, the thing is, you just have a true passion for it, right? Like, that's the thing. Find your passion in life. And look, it's hard. That also statement is really difficult to say to people. Like, what do you want to do? What's your passion? You know, I'm reading a book right now, which they don't define it as like passion. It's just what excites you, right? You know, you can define and almost correlate happiness to excitement. Find what excites you. And the thing about excitement is this. Everyone's like, what do you want to do with your life? What's your passion? Well, you might be excited about something today and not be excited about it tomorrow. Just do what you're excited about today. Start there. And as you do more and more things that excite you, you'll start going down the road of potentially a longer road that's going to be something that excites you for the rest of your life. And if not, it'll excite you for next week and you'll find a new excitement the next week. But just start somewhere and kind of go down that road.
Right. And don't ever do something that you don't enjoy, right? Like, I truly enjoy learning about family law, helping families, learning about community property, and sharing my knowledge with people going through a hard time, again, to hopefully move on from it. And in that passion, it changes with time. So, you know, what my passion was 5 years ago in family law is different from today.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe one day you'll just be a mediator and sitting in between people telling them all the mistakes they're making with their cases, right? So definitely the different roads that you end up going down. That's good. So let's segue into the next question here. So the next question I have for you is, if you could go back and talk to little Nicole that didn't know she wanted to do family law, what would you go back and what would you tell Nicole?
Have confidence in whatever you're going to do. Sometimes I thought in my life, my parents didn't go to college, and you know, should I go to law school? When I went to law school, can I make it through law school? Am I supposed to be here? And I think the most important part of getting through that was to have the confidence in myself to know that it was within me to do whatever I wanted and could think about doing. Yeah. And if I had known that more as a teenager, I might have taken more chances than I did. I always played it very safe. Yeah. But I think...
I could see that. You're a very safe person.
I think in that, you know, shoot for the stars. Don't try to limit yourself by who you are, where you grew up, what your past was, what mistakes you made. There's always... If there's a will, there's a way. And I think that's something that if I could go back, I would remind myself and push myself sometimes. And, luckily I had parents who did that for me.
Yeah, think bigger, dream bigger, shoot for the stars. There's really no end in sight. I mean, somebody else out there has done that astronomical feat. You just have to start somewhere, get up and start running.
Right. Write your own story. Yeah. Don't let anyone else write it for you.
Yeah, I mean, once again, even if you went back and told little you, hey, be more confident, right? It's one of those things. Confidence just comes with experience is what it comes down to, right? And that kind of builds over time.
Right.
And it's tough. Even if your little you saw you 20 years down the road, he's like, okay, I made it. Right. And like, he's still like probably freaking out, like, how the heck did I make it, right? It becomes like a tough conversation. I remember being at like a Tony Robbins conference, and Tony Robbins at the end of it, he just like is on the mic, and he crushed it. He's one of the best people I've ever seen speak in my entire life, if not the best. And he just has this enraptured crowd, and everybody's full attention. And he just like pauses in this moment. He's like, look, if I could go back, I would just tell little me, hey, all the work that you're going to put in, it's all going to be worth it. And you did it. And like, it's just little things like that. And it's so true. You just want to tell that person, hey, it's worth all the effort. It's worth all the headache. Just keep pushing along. It's going to be fine in the end. Right.
My dad told me once, if it was easy, everyone would be doing it.
That's true.
And I thought, wow, how insensitive. I'm so upset right now, and this is what he says to me. But that gave me the drive to keep going.
Dude, it's so true, though.
And it is beyond true. And I remind him that he told me that very frequently. Yeah. And how at the time I thought he was being completely insensitive, and now I share his wisdom all the time with with people I work with or people I'm mentoring.
Dude, it's the truth. I mean, just like when people ask what's it like being an attorney, look, it wasn't easy. It didn't just happen overnight. And like, in our profession, I think there's a certain amount of respect, and I think it's earned. It's like, it wasn't something that just happened immediately. You took the time, you decided this is what you're going to do, and you're going to go out there and help people, of course, hoping that attorney has that mindset. But it doesn't happen overnight. And I have a lot of friends that are like just starting on their career paths, and they're my age, and they're trying to figure out what they want now. And I'm like, and they're like, well, that sounds like a lot of work. I'm like, good. Then it's going to be worth it when you get there at the end. And they're like, well, when do I start making a lot of money? I'm like, forget about the money. Do it. Like, just start down some road, get going, and then at some point you're going to be like, okay, this was worth all the effort. But don't just worry about all the hard work you're going to have to do. Anything worth doing, there's going to be some work involved. Nothing just happens immediately. All the things that happen immediately, you probably inherited it, or you didn't have to do any work for it, and you're not even going to feel fulfilled once you have it. The only things you feel fulfilled from is something you worked to and you built up and you got to that point.
Right. Hard work, dedication, and persistence.
Yeah. So I want to ask you another question. So I want to ask you, if you had 1 year to live, what would you do over the next year?
Is COVID involved or not?
Non-COVID.
I'm going to say in a non-COVID world.
Forget about COVID, or maybe we'll do a part B in a COVID world. Eat pizza every day, right?
Without COVID, me and my husband are probably getting on a plane and traveling to as many different places as we can, seeing as much as we can, ingratiating ourselves in as many different cultures as we can, and experiencing all that this world has to offer. I think we both work incredibly hard every single day, and taking time to be with each other, and probably bringing along as much of the family as we could during the trips. Just being with my loved ones and traveling and seeing the world and again, just experiencing what the world has to offer.
So if you had 1 week left to live, where would you go or what would you do?
1 week. If it's 1 week, I'm heading home to be with my family, be with my roots in New York, and I'll take my husband with me. But heading home. Heading home, just spending some time with family. That's good. If you had to travel to one place in the world, though, what would be on top on your list? Where do you want to go next, I guess, when COVID's over? Oh, man. The conversation at the dinner table every night. And I'll tell you, it stems around, well, what is, for us, we've not been away in a year and, some time now. And so our initial trip, we're kind of on the fence, but we're thinking it's probably going to be Fiji. Oh, nice. Okay, so Fiji for like a week just to do nothing. Which we've been doing nothing for a long time, but it'll be nothing on our terms. I can't imagine Nicole Nuzzo doing nothing. Right. Well, don't bring your rudder's guide. Right. I was gonna say nothing to me is probably reading on the beach. Yeah. And doing some hiking in Fiji, but yeah. Thereafter, we've got a whole lineup of different places, on the list. But I think the very first trip will be one where we're just vegging out. Just chilling. Just kind of relaxing. Chilling and relaxing. And, with COVID's brought an interesting experience to litigation that's been stressful. And so a place where you can completely disconnect, put away the cell phone, put away the computer. Yeah, I'd recommend just, kind of look into things now. You'd be surprised. Some things are open because one of my best friends, it's funny, he had a Zoom wedding. That's like the world that we live in right now. The law changed, so you can have a Zoom wedding. So he had a Zoom wedding, and then he was like, I want to go on my honeymoon, and I just happen to be, I'm like a weirdo. I like to look at Travel Zoo because seeing potential vacations makes me excited, and I saw a trip to the Maldives, and I know he wanted to go. Mm-hmm. The Maldives is open. They're actually like desperate for people to go right now, and they got their rooms at like, instead of it being like $15,000 for like a week or two, it was like $5,000. And so I'd recommend look at some places and see if things are open right now. So it's funny you say Maldives because Maldives and Fiji are like, neck and neck right now in my house on which one will be booked. Yeah, look into it. I'm telling you, it's something cool. I know that for me, like I was talking to Ray before I got here, like
reading the 4-Hour Workweek with Tim Ferriss, and he, one thing I've always wanted to do my entire life is I wanted to live abroad in one country 1 month of the year, every year till the day I die. And I've been making excuses and reasons why I can't go. And then I just looked at it and I did the math, and I'm like, you know what? I think in the next year I'm just going to pick up and go, and I want to go to Rome as like my first place. And I did the math, and it's not that much more expensive. It pretty much costs the same that it would cost me to live here, except I just got to pay my mortgage, which is not horrible because everything's remote anyways, right? Even appearances in courtrooms, it's all virtual right now. So if, towards I think a little bit more towards the end of COVID, when like Rome opens up a little bit more, because I want to go to the museums and obviously all that stuff. That's what I'm like super into, is like art history. I think I'm going to make the trip out there. And so I just say, try to make it sooner rather than later. Don't postpone it too far.
Right. We had to cancel Greece. So we've got to get Greece back in the mix. Back in the mix too.
Where were you going to go in Greece?
We were going to Santorini. We were going to spend some time at the Amman resort, Amman Zoe, I believe it is.
Okay.
In Greece as well, and then
is that also in Santorini, or where is that?
Gosh, no, it's not in Santorini.
Okay.
And then
have you been to Greece?
We've not.
Okay.
So it was our initial trip to Greece to do Athens and then go to Santorini and kind of do some of the island hopping, and unfortunately it wasn't meant to be last year.
Dude, you're gonna have so much fun. Santorini is gorgeous. It's like the ultimate just getaway in Greece for like a romantic couple getaway. A really beautiful nice little city with all the blue tops and just very chill vibes. And then different parts of Greece, there's all the different islands, right? And each island almost has its own personality depending on what country it's closer to. But if you're super into art history, which I'm just a art history nerd, so when we went and saw the Acropolis and the Parthenon in Athens, it's wild. You're just seeing history, right? You don't see that here anywhere, especially in America. There's no history here. No offense to America or anything, there's just none. And so when you go to places like this, you just feel it. You can kind of see it in the buildings. Some of them are still from that ancient time, and even more another place that's similar to that is my dad grew up in Jerusalem, so my aunt still lives out there. So when you go to the city of Jerusalem, you can the whole city is the way it was thousands of years ago, large portions of it. So that's how Athens feels. And then many parts of Greece are just very laid back. The weather's so nice, it's beautiful. You're gonna have a blast.
I've been more and more. COVID has given me the opportunity to hop on the ancestry bandwagon and look at the genealogy of my family, and I'd say there's ancient cultures like the Italian culture, and then there's the American culture that stems back so far, and we've all come from someplace else to here, but going and seeing a piece of ancient history was important to us, and we'll get back on that bandwagon.
Yeah, I highly recommend, though, one thing that I wish I would have done. I went when I was younger with my family. Make sure you have a tour guide. I'm just super nerdy. I want to hear all the facts about everything, and get the weirdest looking, nerdiest dude, not the cool looking guy, the guy that's going to know every fact about everything, because it just makes the trip so much more exciting when you're just getting all the info. Because otherwise you're going and looking at ancient ruins, which is gorgeous and it's amazing and you can think about it, but really getting the details and the explanations about stuff, it excites something in you and you're just super fired up about it.
Right, that's the lawyer in us. I think.
That's a lawyer in us. Yeah, I just want to know all the details for sure. All right, cool. Well, look, Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. Is there anything else that you want to share in regards to family law? If not, I would love to get your details, and I would love to get how people can contact with you, what's the best way to reach you, and once again, just thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun, and it's been a pleasure to share some of the do's and don'ts along the road and what people can expect. To reach me, people can go to bremerwhite.com.
You tell them there.
Or call at 949-221-1000.
Okay, fantastic. So if any of you need any help with any family law matters, please reach out to Nicole. She's a specialist. She's the best. She's also a pleasure to just be around and work with. So Nicole, thank you so much for being here today. This was a blast. I look forward to our book club this coming week too. So I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you guys for chiming in.
Nasty.